Hey guys, welcome back to a brand new video. I'm Daggett, this is Daggett Designs. In today's video, we are going to be drawing two peony flowers in different styles. We're going to be doing a traditional peony flower. We're also going to be doing a neo-traditional peony flower. Now, some of you may have already noticed that YouTube has now allowed me to present a merch bar below my video. This has some awesome Daggett Designs branded t-shirt designs that I drew myself. If you guys are wanting to support the channel and rep some awesome Daggett tattoo style merch, go ahead and click down below and you can pick up some of these awesome t-shirts. That having been said, let's get straight into the video by going to the overhead. Okay guys, welcome back to the table. So I've got an A4 sheet of paper, sketch paper, a mechanical pencil for sketching our design, and an eraser should we need it. So I'm going to start with the traditional style Japanese peony here. I'm going to do this one on the bottom half of our page. So starting off with a circle. Now, the most important distinction between these two styles of peony is the petal shape and also the way that we color them. The petal shape is probably the most important distinguishing feature. So I'm going to start by showing you how we lay those out. So we're going to start with our circle here, and the circle is really going to be the center of our flower with all of our petals wrapping around it and overlapping. So I'm going to start off by just throwing in some overlapping shapes, sort of like this. And that's going to wrap around the shape of our peony, and then these curves are going to overlap the center. Now, sometimes I'll have one line split off into two smaller lines like this. As I come up and forward, I'm always going to be looping that around to the front like this, and we can play around with the shapes a bit later on and joining that back in. So at this point, there's a folded over section there. Now I want to have a larger petal just underneath this, so I might add another curve in like this. I might have that come up, and I'll wrap down from underneath, overlap my line again, and wrap around that petal, so around the front of that petal. And then we can drop some curves back down to join it back into itself. And that can wrap around here. And why not bring out another small section that wraps around the front again, and then joins back into the main section of the petal. And you're going to play around with your petal shapes like this until you're happy with the shape. And you want these to flow in the same direction as the center of your flower or the background elements. So in this case, this is the center of my flower here. I'm going to have everything sort of cupping it and facing this way. So I might bring another petal shape around this way, wrap it around the front like that, and then drop some petal shapes back. In the middle here, there's going to be a little overlap. So I'll just drop in a curve where we'll add some petal shapes in later on. And now before we start working on the larger sort of external petals, I'll start to work on our center a little bit. So this is the main part that I want to have exposed in the middle here. And then we're going to do petals wrapping around it. So I'm going to come from the side here with a couple of overlapping lines. And they're going to come out and towards our center. And then I'll cut back into my circle like this. And I might cut across, maybe from up here, cut across the center like that, and then I can come out from underneath here, maybe with an overlapping line that comes out and back towards center and loops back like this. And now this becomes the center of the flower, so you can of course add in some more petals like that, leaving this open. Now when I'm doing these traditional style designs, I like to keep the center very simple. In this case, I'll just do these little flicks that follow the curvature of my inner circle here. And now from this point, we can start to add our external petals. These are the more opened up petals. There's going to be one that overlaps here as well. So I'm going to bring this one out and down with an S curve like this. And then I'll curve that around to the front like that. And I'll bring that under so we have a fold over portion here. So the way that I organize these petals is essentially a base line like this. Then I'll have a portion that curves around the front, and you can play around with different shapes. You can see I've got a larger section, a smaller section, and a larger section using curves. And then I'll usually throw in a folded over portion of the petal as well. Again, that's something that you can just play around with and find yourself getting comfortable with as you learn to draw these. Now you will probably notice at this stage that I'm not giving any specific directions on how to draw these petal shapes in. And that's basically because I want you guys to get used to doing loose frameworks when you're doing these petals and peony flowers, not so stuck in a certain shape or a certain way. You need to learn to become loose with them and make them look organic and flowing before adding in your actual detail elements. The structure needs to really be there. So in this case, I'm going ahead and adding in all of the base structure, and then we can go ahead and add some detail. Now, a little note on this petal here, I kind of want to have that splaying out more this way. So I'm going to just erase what we've done at the back here. I'll bring this loop a little bit closer in, and then I'll come off it and splay out towards this way using an S curve. And now I'll bring that curve around and add in my fold over like that. So things to keep in mind when you're drawing peonies, how to make them look organic and how to make them look realistic, even when you're doing a more traditional style, is have them follow the elements of the background. So if I was having some wind or some wave bars crashing in this direction, you would have the petals of the flower flowing in that direction as well. The petals of a flower are going to be soft elements and they're going to sort of flow with nature. So you can play around with having them follow the same direction as your background elements. If you're not doing background elements, then you can have them look a little bit more stationary, but I like to give them a little bit more character and have them flow with the scenery that's around them. Okay, before we start adding any detail to our petals, I'm going to just drop in some of the leaves. These are really simple. You're basically going to come out with a curved line, and then you can stem off that with two smaller curved lines. Now, the only rule here is they need to be following the same curvature direction. So this one is curving down, so will the other ones. This one is going upwards, but the curve is going down, so it's not curving out the opposite direction. And then you can link the three up using standard sort of leaf shapes. So just using curves to come around and link up your shapes here that will give you a leaf that splits off into three sections. And this is basically how you draw a very basic peony leaf, which I like to do when I'm doing more traditional style designs. Keep things nice and basic. So this is likely to be the most important element when drawing these traditional style peonies. You can see I've already done it with some of these petals. It's an automatic habit for me, but I'm going to take this rounded shape here from this first petal that we drew in and show you how to shape out these petals correctly. So we'll start from the edge of our fold over. So I'll come in from there and I'll drop down into a little line like this, and then you're going to create a little overlap and another one, and you basically create these little loops of varying sizes to create the edge of your petal. So the edge of your petal is going to have these little loops or little curve shapes to them that create your variation on the edge there, and this is what sort of distinguishes it as a peony flower. We can cut back down for our solid line at the back of that part of the petal, and for this curved part I'm going to do the same thing, bringing in these little loops. I like to make sure they're varying in size, they're not all the same size, and for some of them I'll even do a little double loop, so there's a little hop in the middle. It's almost like a little M shape. And I'll sometimes drop them down a bit further or bring them higher up, and this varies the shape of the petal quite dramatically. So I'll do that same thing again with this bottom petal here to demonstrate. I'm going to start off our curve here, the point that it folds over, and add in a little loop. I might add in a double loop and a small loop. I might add in a bigger one, another small one, another small one, a longer one, a double one, a small one, a bigger one. And you're basically coming along and adding in these little loop shapes of varying sizes to give the edge of your petal that sort of texture. As you get to the fold over, you loop in, and then you follow along the top line of your fold over to give you that edge texture, the petal texture. But it just takes a little bit of work, and play around doing those little loops. Even if you just get a sketchbook page and do lots of little peony petals, just individual petals, before you start working on doing a full flower, that's going to come together a lot nicer. Okay, so once you've filled in the edge texture for all of the petals on your peony flower and make the lines a little bit more solid, you've basically done a traditional style Japanese peony. Nice and solid, really simple, but once you color this one in, it's going to be really vibrant. Before we go ahead and paint it, we're going to go ahead and start drawing our neo-traditional style peony so that we can look at some of the differences in style. So I've just turned my page around. I'm going to be doing the neo-traditional one at the bottom here. And again, we're going to start off with a little circle shape. So I like to start with a nice central point, and in the middle of that I'm going to add in another little circle that's going to give me a point of reference for where our stamens and the bulb at the center of our flower is going to be. Now we're going to start the same process we did last time, layering in the different areas of petal shapes on this one. And this process is going to be very similar to the last peony that we did, so I wouldn't worry too much about this stage. It's very, very similar. Adding in overlapping lines, adding in foldovers, and just adding in your basic general shapes. Now, one thing I will make mention of is, for the most part, the neo-traditional style peonies that I've seen tend to be a lot more open, a lot more bloomed than the Japanese style ones, which look a lot softer and more sort of flowing. These ones tend to be more solid and bold in that aspect. So there's going to be a little bit more openness to it. So I want you to try and keep your petal shape and petal structure a little bit more open. Now I'm going to go into detail shortly about how to draw in the different petals for the neo-traditional style one. But another thing to keep in mind when you're doing this one is to add in, you can still add in foldovers, but you want to have these petal shapes a little bit longer and a little bit larger. So as they sort of come out, they're going to taper out. Similar to how we did the leaves on our Japanese peony here, you're going to start a little bit smaller at the base of the petal and then sort of branch it out a little bit for the larger sections of your petal. So another example will be this petal here, which I'm going to bring up, and I'll make the loops at the end quite large, and then I'll drop it back in. For the petals at the center of your flower, it's pretty much going to be the same thing. You're basically adding in the sort of curved circular shape around your main bulb there, and then adding in petals around it that are going to sort of support it and cup that area. Now, another thing to mention while doing your petal shapes is that the neo-traditional style usually dictates that there's going to be slightly more realistic approach to things, so don't be scared to add in little nicks and details to your petals that make them look a little bit more worn and just that little bit more realistic. That's sort of a little bit more of the hallmark of this neo-traditional style. Now again, before we start adding any detail to our petals, I'll drop in my leaf shapes. The general structure of your leaves will be the same. It's going to be 3 lines going off in the same direction in terms of their curvature, but you're going to add a little bit more detail to them. So the overall structure and shape of these is going to be exactly the same as your more traditional style ones. The only difference is the level of detail and how you shade and color them. So I'm going to go ahead and add in those details. The way I like to do that is add a little bit more of a peak to the end of my leaf, and then I'll add a little bumpy texture to the side of the leaf by adding these little curves in, going back towards the base of my leaf shape there, like that. And you'll do the same thing for the smaller sections of the leaf there. Now essentially what I'll do is strengthen up my center lines. These are the veins running through the center of the petal or the leaf. And then you could do connecting lines from each section on the side of your leaves here, just going back towards the center with S curves. And this will give it that real veiny look on the inside of the leaf that is more of a realistic look with leaves here. Now another style of leaf we can do with this sort of more realistic style is a folded over leaf. In this case we'll do a line over like this and a line coming out like this. In fact, I might make that a little bit smaller. More like that. And then you can go ahead and add in those little detail elements that are going to make this look a little bit more realistic. Add in your veins. And like that, you've got a leaf that is more of a folded over style leaf. If you wanted to, you could add in the other small leaf at the back here just to give it that little bit more depth and make it look a little bit more realistic. Now looking at doing the petal texture for this particular flower, on this one we've done really small little bumps on the edges of our petals. For this one, we're going to do something a little bit different. This is more neo-traditional fashion that I've seen, is to do the center of each of your petals a little bit of a spike or a sharp little point to the center of your petals. You don't have to do it for all of them, but you know, for some of them. And then instead of doing lots of little loops, you'll do a combination of small loops and larger sections. So we've got a small one here, and that'll split off into a larger one, and maybe a smaller one. Now, the other thing you might notice with these more neo-traditional style ones is the loops don't necessarily overlap the same way they do with the traditional ones. So again, to demonstrate this, I'll draw two little curves like this. With the more traditional style ones, the little curves actually overlap each other as you move along the edge of your petal. So each of them starts behind the last one. With the more neo-traditional style one, they tend to touch end to end almost. So they don't tend to overlap each other quite as much. This gives it a more feathered edge, and this gives it a little bit more of a solid edge approach. It depends on the style. Now, another thing you can do with these sort of designs is flick the ends of your petal off. Now, I'm not saying that that has to be done to make this neo-traditional. I'm not even saying that that is how neo-traditional stuff has to look. However, that's just an approach that I see with a lot of neo-traditional designs, is to flick the ends of your lines off a little bit more, make them look a little bit more pointy at the ends there, and somewhat gives them a little bit more of a realistic appearance. So now you're just keeping these little things in mind as you go through and fill in your little petal shapes. Again, I like to add in that little point at the tip of each of my petals, roughly at the center. And then I just go around basically and add in the curves. And again, I keep those curves nice and wide, which is slightly different to the way we would with more traditional style peony petals. Now, another thing you may have already noticed is that generally when you're doing these neo-traditional style ones, you'll keep the foldovers a little bit more minimal. So you're not going to have nearly as many little folded over sections in your petals. They're going to be a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more flat, or a little bit smoother as you come around the edges. This is a little bit less textured than more the traditional style of doing it. But again, this is the way that I see it done most of the time with neo-traditional style designs. At this point, we're looking at drawing the center of the flower. Again, this is a point that I find to be very different with this neo-traditional style. Most people will try and make the center of the flower look a little bit more realistic with the neo-traditional style. I like to add in this little curve like this. At the top, a little circle. And then I'll come down from there with these overlapping lines that just follow the shape and structure of my little semicircle curve there. Now that's going to give me like a little ball in the center with all these lines coming down. That creates like a small bud. And then around that, you're going to add in the stamens. So you're just going in and adding in these little curved noodle shapes. I've covered these before. They're basically just long little curved noodle shapes that follow the curvature of the flower. So we're coming around that center, the little bud at the center of the flower, and you can come around it from all different sides, all angles, like this. Now here's something I don't see with traditional designs too often, but you're actually going to take our little stamens here and interweave them with some of the petals. So you can have some of them coming out from in between other petals like this. And this is like they're, you know, sort of spread out throughout the flower and are coming out from inside the different parts of the flower there. And again, this is something I see is much more common with neo-traditional style designs with flowers. I see it done with chrysanthemums and with peonies, and you know, different styles of flowers where the stamens are quite prominent. Not so much something common with a traditional style. Okay, now as you can see, we've got two very different style peonies. We've got the more traditional Japanese style peony and a more modern, updated, neo-traditional style peony. They've got different style leaves, a different style center, and most importantly, they've got the different texture on the outside of the petals. Now, before the end of the video, I want you guys to hit pause, go down to the comments, and let me know which one of these designs you like better. The more traditional Japanese design or the more neo-traditional design, and then stick around till the end of the video to find out which one is my favorite and why. I've now done the inking or the line work for our peonies here. Now you can really start to see the difference in terms of detail. So with this one, I used a 0.5 size marker for every single line in this peony here. including the little whipped off lines for the inner stamen area there. And this gives it a very, very simple look. There's not too much line weight contrast, apart from the small amount of whip lines that I did, which is just applying pressure and then whipping the line off nice and quickly so that you get a slight taper on there. But aside from that, very, very simple in the line work. Whereas this one is much more complex. I used a 0.5 for all of the main lines around my petals, a 0.2 for the small stamen lines and for the veins inside the leaves. And then I used a 0.1 to go into each and every petal. And on the inside of the petals, I did these little lines that follow the contour shape of each petal and flow back towards the center. So they follow the contour of each of my petals, flowing down towards the center. And again, this is something you'll see done very commonly with neo-traditional style peony designs. So we're gonna start by painting our traditional style peony. I've got 3 colors, so we're using a vivid red orange as the main color for our peony. When you blend this one out, it's more of a peach color, which I really love for doing peony designs. I have yellow orange azo, which we're just using for the stamen on the inside of the flower. And then I've also got sap green for the leaves. So as you can see with this one, a very simple color palette. I have 2 brushes. These are synthetic nylon Taklon hairs. This is a number 5 and a number 6. And I've also got a glass of water to wash my brushes out and to assist with blending. Now, like I said, in working on this one, we're using very, very simple color palette, starting off with our orange and coming into the bottom of each of our petals. And I like to leave a little bit of white along the border of each of the petals on the outside edge. This in tattooing would be called a skin gap or a flesh gap, sometimes called a skin break. Very common with traditional styles, and it's quite important actually. It gives the design a little bit of breathing space, helps the design look a little bit more brighter, and it helps break the color up a little bit as well. I'm then blending the colors out and forward towards the edge texture of the petal. And then again, I'm just leaving that little bit of a skin break right at the edge of the petal. So I'm not going right to the edge. This is going to give us that traditional style. Now, talking about my color palette a little bit here, the reason we're using such simple colors is this is a traditional style design. Generally speaking, with more traditional designs, you'll find a more simple, bold color palette. Not as much contrast with shading and things like that. You'll find usually very minimal, basic shading and very nice, bold, simple colors. This is sort of hallmark of traditional tattoo design. So I like to try and make sure that I incorporate that when I'm designing a more traditional design. Now you'll notice that I leave these little skin breaks not only at the edge of all of my petals, but sometimes I'll leave them in the middle of some of my petals as a little straight or curved line following the curvature of the petal. This is the equivalent of doing your contour lines in your neo-traditional style one, that I'm using the negative space of my white paper, or if I was tattooing this, I'd be using the negative space created by the skin to divide up sections and add those contour sections there, the contour lines. So you can also use your skin breaks to create those little bits of contour and add that little element of detail to your petals. Now, something you may notice is that I always start at the base of a petal using the darkest sort of color, the innermost part of the petal. And the reason for this is that it gives it a natural shadow, a natural style shadow, so that as we shade up towards the outer edges of the petal, we go from darker to lighter. And you get this nice gradual transition from dark to light that when layered in between each of the petals actually gives you a very natural dark to light transition. So this way, even without undershading or using different tone or different colors, you can still create some depth and a little bit more of an interesting look, a less flat look, by adding darker tones to the base of the petal and blending out to a lighter tone. This is what helps it make it look layered. It looks like they're layered petals on top of each other. Now, as for doing the leaves, you're going to come in with your sap green, and I'm not going to be doing any blending or shading here. I'm basically starting at the back of my leaf and working towards the front of the leaf here. And I just leave a white gap along the border of the leaf and on the opposite side center of the leaf like this as I come back towards center. So that's basically the way that we do our peony leaves for this more traditional style. Making sure to leave a white gap along the outside border of your leaf, and you can go right to center on your back side of the leaf. And as you come around to the front side, I like to leave a little white gap along that center strip and also around the border of the actual leaf shape. As you can see, this is a really simple way to paint our peony leaves, but I really like the way it looks. It's a very traditional way of doing it, and I think it looks really nice. It's very bold, very simple and clear what's happening, and how the leaf actually looks, the color, and it really shows off the rest of the flower. It sort of sits in the background a little bit more. So that's how you're going to paint your leaves. And now painting in the center of the flower is the simplest thing in the world. You're basically going to take some yellow orange azo, come in from the center towards the edge, and then take your blending brush and just work that yellow out from the center into those small lines that you did. And that is how we paint the more traditional style peony flower. Now that we've finished our traditional style peony, it's time to start our neo-traditional style. Now you can probably see that there's drops of green all over my page. Yeah, well, I was setting up the new palette for the neo-traditional style, and somehow I clumsily managed to spill an entire bottle, or nearly an entire bottle, of phthalo green. So that's why there's ink splatter all over the page. Luckily, it's not too bad, and I can continue with the video. So to go over the new palette, I've got Carbon Black, Transparent Raw Umber, Yellow Orange Azo, Vivid Red Orange, that bastard phthalo green, and I've also got some sap green. Okay, to start this one off, we're going to do some black shading. I always like to start with black shading. So doing our little leaves here, I'm going to come in off the edge of my leaf with a little bit of black, and taking a little bit of water just to blend the edge of that black to a grey. Then I'll come in off the center line of the leaf with a little bit of black. Once again with the blending brush to blend that black out to a grey. So you're creating these little values in there. I'll come up to the edge of the next little section of the leaf, just adding a little bit of black to it. And I'll blend that out a little bit. Now when I say blend it out, we're just feathering that edge out to soften it a little bit, soften the transition between black and the other colors. Coming up off that middle vein with a bit of my black and feathering it out, and continuing doing the leaves in this manner. Once I've done the black shading on the leaves, I'm going to come in and create some values using my transparent raw umber, and we're only doing this on the outside of the petals, so basically all of the foldovers and the outer portions of the petals. So to give you an example, I'll come into this petal up here and add in a little bit of my raw umber, and then blend that out towards the edge of the petal. So basically the same method that we did on our first peony, using this color, this slightly brown or tan color, and blending it out towards the edges of the petal, but we're only doing the outside portion of the petals. Now, once I've got that darker value in there, I'm going to go in over the top of it using my yellow orange azo as our outer color. And as I get towards the edge of the petal, I'll just blend that out to a nice lighter yellow. This way we get a nice transition from a brown or tan sort of color through to a deep yellow and through to a very light yellow towards the edges. Now, something you'll notice is quite common with neo-traditional style peonies is that they are two-tone, meaning they've got one color on the inside of the flower and one color on the outside of the petal. This is, in my opinion, something very common with neo-traditional designs, not really seen too much with traditional style designs, especially Japanese traditional style designs. So I like to do two tones on the inside and the outside of the petals when I do neo-traditional style flowers. Now, once I've done my yellow and washed my brush out, we're gonna go in with our vivid red orange, and we're gonna do the exact same thing we did with our more traditional style peony, starting at the base of each petal with a darker tone. And then we'll take our blending brush and we'll gently blend that out towards the edges. Now, the only difference with this one is we are going wall to wall, so we're not leaving skin breaks at the edge of our petals. You can leave a little bit if you'd like to create that little bit of white glow around the edge of each of your petals, but again, that's not really necessary with this sort of style. You can go all the way to the edge of your petals with color if you would like. So I'm just starting at the base, applying carefully my color, working that out towards the edge of my flower, and just pulling the color right up to the edge of the flower, not really leaving any gaps of skin. Now you can see what happened here was I come up this side with pink, and then as I got across, it faded to a really light pink and then to white. This is not what I would really call a skin break. It's not a clean break. It more blends off into white. That's something that I see with some near-traditional designs and some traditional designs. And it's something that I quite like, so I'm going to leave that in there. There's no, hard and fast rules when doing this sort of style or when doing any design, really. It's up to you. But there are some guidelines to making things look a certain way. So I would say no solid skin breaks with your near-traditional stuff, and use more of those smooth sort of fades to white if you want to have some white showing or skin showing. And with your traditional designs, definitely put some skin breaks in there. That sort of is a bit of a rule, and there certainly are more rules with traditional style tattoo design than with near traditional style. Now, something you may have already noticed is that I'm very carefully working around the stamens, the ones that are sticking out between the petals. That they're going to come in really important very shortly, so just make sure you are being careful and painting around those. You don't want to overlap those with your pink. Now, once you've done the inside of your petals with that wall-to-wall pink, we're going to go ahead and start doing the stamens. So we're going to use some of our phthalo green here. And we're coming in and just painting in each of the stamens individually with phthalo green, solid phthalo green, edge to edge, and there's not going to be any blending or shading involved for these little guys, just solid color. Now for the center portion of my flower, I'm going to go into just a little bit of sap green and come up from the base section of that, and then I'll wash my brush, go back into my phthalo green, and mix the two colors on the page as I come up towards the center of our little dome shape. And then I'm just going to blend that up through to a really pale color as we get to that little circle at the very end. At this point, I like to take just a little bit of our vivid red orange and paint in the little flower or the little bud portion in the middle of our flower there. Okay, last thing to do from here is paint in our leaves. So we're going into sap green for these ones, and you're going to basically paint over the top of your black shading towards center, and then blend that up towards the center to a lighter green. This way you're creating a gradient transition from black to dark green to a slightly lighter green, and then through to a light green using water and blending that out. So this way we get a nice transition of greens. And that is it for how to draw peony in two different styles, Japanese traditional and neo-traditional. Let me know in the comments down below which one you like better. And to answer my own question from earlier before, which one do I like better? Anyone that's followed my work for any length of time will probably know that I like the traditional style better. The traditional style is just so much more simple and bold to me. I love the bright colors and I love how simple it is. That having been said, there are things to admire about neo-traditional style. I love the shading and the complexity within some of the designs. I like the shape of them. I like that they can create more of a three-dimensional structure. And I also like how this style translates to dark art. I do really like dark art style, you know, the likes of Dave Corrier or Chet Zar, these sort of artwork styles that are more grungy and dark, and I do feel like the neo-traditional style captures these styles a little bit better when you're tattooing them. You know, you can create a little bit more dimension and you can give these really deep, rich shadows to your designs with smooth gradients, and that's something that's missing with traditional style designs. However, I still love the traditional style design. I really hope you guys enjoyed this one and learnt a lot. Make sure to like this video and I'll see you guys in the next one. All right, bye-bye. If you like the content that I make and you'd like to support the channel, make sure you smash that like button. And hey, while you're at it, check out one of these other great videos.